Citizens of the Reject Nation, we are going to watch today a very special Last of Us video called Unlocking a Surprising Genius Companion Series Part 1. It's a very, very long video. This will be the first video John and I are covering together regarding Last of Us. Since he has not played the game, he's covering it separately with Tara Erickson, and then I'm covering it with Andrew Gordon. But yeah, Filmwise is a new channel launched by Filup Molina, who you might know from his work with new Rockstars, but now he's got a new channel going. This video has been hyped for me, like nonstop. I know that Filup spent weeks on this video, maybe a couple of months. Heavy spoilers, who's killing it with his coverage for this series right now. Actually said that this is the best video he's seen regarding The Last of Us. I've had several people hit me up saying that maybe we should react to it. Yeah, I'm here to tell you that we are going to do that right now. You can subscribe to Filmwise, link in the description box. You can check out the original video. I actually don't know what the angle is on it. I'm here to support, and I want to see what's going on, and enough people have asked us to check it out, so here we are to do it. Before we do that, please go ahead, leave a like. Let's see what's in store.
Why is it so hard to make a successful video game adaptation? Is it even possible to do? In the 30 years since the first time Hollywood took a swing, it's kind of become this elusive mystery, an unattainable goal. Since that Super Mario Brothers movie, there have been countless attempts, but all they've done is make it seem less possible to translate the magic of a video game narrative to any other screen, large or small. Even the writer and showrunner of this new Last of Us show, Craig Mazin, long before taking on this job, agreed that video game adaptations are historically terrible.
A lot of these assets, I think, ultimately become junk.
So, with a mountain of failed adaptations behind them, a budget of over $100 million, and an industry landscape that's about ready to say, yeah, we only want sequels and adaptations, but let's go ahead and forget about video games as source material, because they don't work. There is an immense amount of pressure for HBO to get it right this time. So then, why would they give this seemingly impossible task to the same guy who made these movies?
But I can tell when danger's near. I just...
Yep. Really?
I like superhero movie.
You're kneeling on my crotch.
He made those movies?
Yeah, before Chernobyl, Craig Mazin does not have the most dramatically hefty or widely respectable filmography.
I had no idea.
Complete reinvention.
Holy crap. I was really thrown for a loop there.
Yeah, I think he even worked on some of the Hangovers or something like that. Yeah.
Well, that's fascinating to hear. I mean, I gotta say, so far, it's already just the setup for what we're about to watch. And yeah, the editing on this is phenomenal already.
Watch a TV documentary here.
Yeah, it really feels that way. And I think what Last of Us is getting right is the fact that they're focusing on character and emotion first before focusing on bringing gameplay to life. And I think that's a lot of time where a lot of these video game adaptations go wrong. It's like, what do they enjoy most when they're actually playing the game? But I've always said, if you're going to adapt something, go for the TV show, because it started working out pretty well for the animated medium when they were doing that. And now live action, they're proving it. We're proving it here.
Welcome to Filmwise. In this 3-part miniseries, we're going to be dismantling the idea of the impossible video game adaptation. And by analyzing the structure of this story and of the world the show takes place in, we're going to figure out what's really going on here. Not just in The Last of Us, but in this seemingly insane choice to hand the reins to Craig Mazin. A choice he himself knows is pretty scary.
I didn't have to draw so much from my bottomless well of self-loathing. Instead, I borrowed from my bottomless well of fear.
Here's the thing, Craig Mazin is exactly the right person to make this adaptation a success. The only wrong move for him and for HBO would be to not even try. And much like the themes of this story itself, when it comes to Joel's journey, the threat of a global pandemic, or protecting the ones you love, the greatest risk is not taking one. By the way, if you're wondering where I'm getting all this from, well, we're lucky enough to have the words of Craig Mazin himself to help guide us in analyzing what this story is really about.
My name is Craig Mazin, and this is Script Notes, a podcast about screenwriting and things that are interesting to screenwriters.
On his screenwriting podcast, Craig Mazin tells us how he builds stories. Here's how he says we should start.
But when you think of the idea, the very next question you should ask is, what central dramatic argument would fit really well with this?
That's how we made superhero movies.
What Mazin does with most of the first episode of The Last of Us. In
Real
fact, later in our
deconstruction.
miniseries, we'll be discussing multiple episodes of the show at a time, but in this video, we're going to focus mostly on the pilot, because it not only encompasses all of Act 1 of the larger story, but each scene within it is setting the groundwork for all of the mega themes that will come later. For instance, in the show's very first scene, it immediately is planting the seed for the show's entire central dramatic argument.
Definitely,
We begin
definitely.
with a new edition of the story, not from the game. It's a clip from a 1968 TV talk show where a scientist predicts how humanity could fall to a threat as seemingly benign as a fungus, but only if we ignore the warnings of things like, say, global warming.
What if the world was to get slightly warmer? Well, now there is reason to evolve. Cordyceps, aspergillus, any one of them could become capable of burrowing into our brains and taking control. Billions of puppets permanently fixed on one unifying goal: to spread the infection to every last human alive by any means necessary.
The jokes that the host makes indicates how their world
Big
came
head.
to respond to this warning. But of course, that's not just true for their world.
There is no pandemic flu in our country at this time. But if we wait for a pandemic to appear, it will be too late to prepare.
We have to put in place an infrastructure that allows us to see it quickly, isolate it quickly, respond to it quickly.
Yeah, that's something that I think this show in particular, better than the video game does, is draw on real world things that people would say are political, but they're just scientific shit that we're dealing with all the time.
Sure.
And I think that this show really knows how to demonstrate that in a phenomenal way. And I haven't seen Chernobyl, but from what I imagine about what goes on in Chernobyl, Craig Mazin already had a really great knack for that, to implement some of those flourishes over to here, whereas a lot of shows and movies might get too bogged down with it. He knows how to make it feel more lived in. And it was cool is that Chernobyl's a true story, and he's now taking this into a fictional realm.
Sure, kind of extrapolating off of that, because so much of Chernobyl is about watching the human error and hubris that can lead
Yes.
to a disaster such as this, and then here you multiply it by all these issues that we can't seem to agree on just in culture, and those agreements could, or disagreements could be incredibly costly, as illustrated by what they're putting out here. And it's not overly preachy as of now, but it does seem like they did put a solid effort into going, yeah, what can we actually contemplate with all this cool stuff that we're doing with infected and all
Yes.
that stuff?
What are the dangers of inaction? And we answer it through the stories of Joel and Ellie, the global pandemic around them, and those around us. I'm actually not talking about COVID here, by the way, but more on that later. And it even applies to Craig Mazin's own path in making this show. And if at any point you think I'm reaching when I'm showing the true meaning of the story has to do with something in our world, just know that's what Mazin has told us to look out for himself.
Everything we wanted to do was to say to people, listen, we're showing you extraordinary circumstances, a world that's fallen apart, and there are monsters, and all this stuff is happening, but it is applicable to your life right now here in the world that isn't falling apart.
After the idea and
But it
central
could.
thematic argument are introduced, Mazin says you have to introduce your protagonist and their ordinary world.
What ordinary means here is that the protagonist's life essentially exemplifies their ignorance of the theme of the argument that you want them to believe eventually. In fact, they believe the opposite of that argument.
Soon after we jump forward to 2003, we'll
like
meet that
that.
protagonist, Joel Miller, and his ordinary world, which is a life stuck in time. He's doing that purposefully. He believes the exact opposite of inaction being dangerous. He goes out of his way to avoid the passage of time because acknowledging it and taking action is what he thinks is the true danger. He ignores his birthday, he sleeps through his alarm. He hates time so much, he even keeps his only wristwatch locked away in a drawer. One change from the game, by the way,
Dead
is that this
battery.
is all happening on Joel's 36th birthday,
How old are you again?
36.
but in the video game, it's his 32nd. Ironically, that's right around how old Craig Mazin was when his first scary movie came out. And just like these first events in the show, that was
Underrated.
also 20 years ago.
My God, this is all a cathartic release for Craig Mazin to get his frustrations out on working on scary movies.
I will be respected.
I'm going to draw from my pain of the studio anxieties that were dealt my way.
Anguish of paying my dues to the system with franchise sequels.
Oh, that's gnarly. I actually never picked up on that whole idea of Joel kind of resistance against time.
Yeah.
That is a really, really interesting take.
Subtly done, yeah.
At that time, Craig said he'd actually been hoping to move toward more adult fare. But his bosses at Miramax suddenly dropped this scary movie thing in his lap, and then 7 years went by. So, just like Joel, he finds himself in an unfulfilling but relatively safe category, stuck doing the same thing again and again, but at least not risking any true loss. However, the reality is, for both Craig and for Joel, that time keeps ticking anyway. And that's embodied by Joel's daughter, Sarah. She's the antithesis to Joel's thesis. She wants to celebrate, or at least experience, each moment that passes.
She's growing.
She forces Joel to acknowledge his birthday. She constantly asks about what's on the news. She even has a textbook on how to run a school news program. She probably would have been a reporter somewhere. Mazin makes Sarah this way to begin Joel's evolution using what's called the Hegelian dialectic.
Ooh.
That's a fancy way to say that there's a perpetual tug of war between any two ideas, a thesis and an antithesis. Hegel, the guy that came up with the dialectic, he said that it's all really just a cycle. Neither side really wins so much as they give up on tugging and land at a newly combined thesis, a point we call synthesis.
Cool.
But that's also a point Joel
Damn, I
isn't
love
ready
that.
for.
Yeah.
He ain't done tugging. Now, it's important to note, just because
Tug away.
they are thematically opposed doesn't mean Joel and his daughter don't have a deep bond. Without saying a word about it, we can subconsciously tell that the guitar in the living room, the poster of The Clash in Sarah's room, the open CD cases in Joel's room, even the magnet on the fridge for the Austin City Limits Music Fest, those are symbols of a deep connection they share.
Dude, this editing is phenomenal.
Yeah, this is so engrossing.
How far are we? We're 7 minutes.
This is beautiful.
Jesus Christ. This is insane.
Yep, absolutely.
It's been a while that I've seen a YouTube video with this kind of editing.
This feels like a TV special.
So mind-blowing. Holy crap.
Top-notch job.
I can't get over it. That is gnarly.
A different way they can communicate outside the limitations of time, through their appreciation for music.
Yeah, that's a
For those who have
consistent
played
theme.
The Last of Us sequel, you actually know that Joel was once an aspiring musician. Part of Joel and Sarah's morning routine seems to be enjoying a bit of music together, but we can see the example of how messages hide in that music as the song playing here is White Flag by Dido.
Gonna have to wear diapers soon.
He says I don't already.
The lyrics are about someone who knows that the days left in their relationship are numbered. But they have no plans to move on or surrender their love.
No detail wasted.
It's a sweet sentiment, but it's taken to an unhealthy place. With the bridge of the song foreshadowing even 20 years from now, Joel's still gonna pretend he's moved on, almost seeming like he never was a father at all, but he's still secretly hurting just the same.
Yeah.
We could have predicted Joel's reaction because, as you remember, he
Fascinating.
embodies the thesis that you can stay safe as long as you freeze time. So that's why it's up to Sarah, the antithetical character, to remind him of the truth. Somehow, intuitively, she knows their time left is limited, and by fixing Joel's watch, she's forcing him to bring time back into his life. Because, as she says later,
You were never gonna do it for yourself, so.
Now, to be clear, Joel's refusal to accept the passage of time doesn't mean he's without purpose. He's actually driven to freeze time as a sad attempt to be the ultimate protector, even from things like secondhand smoke. Put that out. This is likely a philosophy he inherited, as not only is his watch probably a hand-me-down from either the Vietnam era or World War II, but his hunter's knife is actually a Vietnam standard issue Buck 110. But whether or not Joel was a soldier before, since that Desert Storm bumper sticker we see might actually belong to Tommy.
Definitely.
It's clear that his family operates under the belief that protecting others is the ultimate purpose. Though through Sarah's fascination with the engraving of wild horses on that tucked away knife, we can see a symbol of Joel's past and his carefree spirit being locked away as well. That's not him now. If anything,
Holy
he's a horse
shit.
stuck in a stable. And for the zombie genre, it's actually a bit unusual to do so much establishing of a character stuck in stasis rather than just letting them react to the insane chaos around them. As we'll soon see with the 20-year time jump, this show actually skips the adjustment period that entire other stories are set in. That's on purpose.
I'm not a huge fan of the zombie genre. When the genre creates a situation in which every decision is a matter of life and death, I get fatigued by it. I am fascinated by people's responses to things. It's interesting to watch characters respond in various ways to a disruption of stasis that can be overcome.
Speaking of stasis, after Scary Movie 3, Craig was also trapped in his own frozen career bubble, pumping out the same content over and over again, despite it not being fulfilling.
I mean, the pressure that we were under from the Weinsteins to make those movies as quickly as possible was brutal, and we couldn't do them as well as we wanted to do them.
But that's Craig just embodying his own form of story structure. Your hero can't shake themselves out of stasis.
For some reason, your video is just making me wonder, what was the scary movie idea that he had?
What was
where he could implement all of these deeper themes of synthesis and all that?
What philosophical debate does this parody movie have to offer?
Like, what is the thesis and antithesis?
What will the synthesis
What
become?
are we talking about? What's scary? Keeps coming back to Scary Movie 3. The easiest way to communicate, you know, when you're trying to tell someone about The Last of Us, it's kind of like a zombie game. I don't think I've ever called it a zombie game. It's a survival game, but a lot of people often refer to it as that just because there's some similar things, infection, that behave like rabbit. I think having Craig Mazin on board is perfect when that's his thought process, because it allows him to respect the material without going, I want to change the material. A lot of adaptations actually go wrong is when they, I don't really like this, I'm going to make it how I like it. He's like the perfect middle ground for it.
Well, and the game is, from the outside at least, has always sounded like it's not your average zombie game. It's a really story-driven thing, and I feel like that's also, too, kind of a saving grace that helps this even further work.
Yeah, I don't know what the best way is to leave something. I wish I did.
Back in the world of The Last of Us, Sarah's teacher underlines this moment of debate that heroes arrive to in their stories. She asks the key question.
Okay, the sentence is, where are you going?
In life, just like in writing, a character is defined by their choices and their actions. A character who doesn't take action is not only aimless, they aren't even really existing in their own plot or in their own life. Sarah contemplates this for herself and for her father against that ever-ticking clock of reality. By the way, if you aren't sold on Sarah's obsession with time, let's just check out where she goes next. What's really interesting about this moment is what Sarah knows is true, but Joel is in denial of, and that's that time is universal. There's no hiding from it. For everyone, everywhere, no matter what choices they make, they're all about to experience the exact same thing in the very same moments. The consequences of
clocks,
time.
yeah.
Up next, Sarah visits with her neighbors, and it's Mrs. Adler who hints at the path that Joel's gonna have to take.
People out there need to get right with Jesus. 3 nails plus 1 cross equals 4 given.
That's not to say Joel needs to find Jesus so much as he'll need to seek salvation or redemption for his sins of inaction. It's
Find the
possible
light.
that Craig Mazin was feeling this as well, because after years of making those spoof movies,
I would argue the spoof is dead.
you could tell it didn't feel good to be contributing those works to the world.
If there's one thing that people who wrote comedy features know, it's that they're out there with their knives, and you are going to have to face the music sooner or later.
That same stress about how little time we all have is why Sarah lies to Mrs. Adler about her father being home soon.
You know what? My dad's gonna be back real soon. I should go.
She knows he won't be home for hours, but she also knows how we spend our time is the only thing about time that we can actually control. This is another lesson that Joel actually needs to learn, which is why it's up to Sarah to point out that he's failed on his promise and that he's home late again.
It's 10.
Oh no.
He's not only running out of time to celebrate his own birthday, he's running out of time to spend with her, literally. This ultimate failure in his current way of thinking is similar to the last spoof movie that Craig Mazin made. It's called Superhero Movie, and it was the first time he not only wrote the spoof movie, but he also took the helm and directed it too. And it was by far his worst received. It wasn't just the worst reviewed, it actually earned $100 million less than his last Scary Movie film.
I'll tell you, the worst situation is when you have a bad movie that also doesn't make a lot of money. What an awful experience it was for me to work on it and make it, and then also to watch it crash and burn.
This experience was so bad, it took Craig 15 years to don the director's cap again. And that was actually on this very episode of The Last of Us.
Oh, no way.
Dang, I missed
The
that.
episode of the show he directed, you can understand why we're paying so much extra attention to the choices he made within it. But back to the early 2010s, the choices he made then implied an initial search for salvation by focusing on slightly higher brow comedy, though only slightly, with his work on Hangover 2 and 3 and Identity. These films were certainly more successful than Superhero Movie, but they still actually only performed about as well as the Scary Movie films did. especially critically. Just like how Mazin could have kept making spoof movies, but his refusal to showed hints of a desire to change and elevate, Joel also makes new promises. He's gonna bring a cake tomorrow, he'll wear the watch, though he actually still jokes about refusing to accept its timekeeping.
What?
I don't hear anything.
The thing is, we know these people haven't really changed yet. We're just seeing hints that they could.
You made Identity Thief?
I want to see the credit. Yeah, I was like, is he a writer on it? What did he do there?
I had a hard time paying attention after him. He's got to be the writer of it.
Yeah.
I'm trying to pay attention to Philip's video right now, but I'm really stuck on the fact that he made one of the movies. I hate that movie so much.
Most tedious, like arduous movies to sit through. Yeah.
Game has humor through the characters, and I think he brings that to life as well. I know he's not the only director and only writer on this show. He's the showrunner. Does an excellent job still bringing those qualities to life in a very beautiful way. And I think this use of time is also very neat from a writing standpoint. When I watched the first episode, I thought it was more about the ticking clock of the impending doom coming around the corner. And I was aware of the whole thing with the watch and how it's going to break and Sarah and all that. But I didn't register whatsoever, oh, there's actually a much deeper meaning to this whole the symbolism of time here, of how it reflects upon the characters' internal turmoils and struggles and the arcs they're going to have to go on throughout the series.
We know Joel hasn't really embraced change because he even hesitates to get his brother out of jail. He has to be guilted into taking action.
Now?
It's Friday. You don't get me out tonight. I'm in here all weekend.
Note, by the way, that Tommy doesn't have the same issue that Joel has. He saw someone in trouble and he immediately jumped in to save her.
I was at the bar. Some guy goes crazy, starts swinging at a waitress. I stepped in.
Then, as another clock points out just how little time is left in this day, moments before midnight, it's possible that Joel's gonna come to regret this action he's taking. He might dig his heels in even further and think he should have never stepped away and accepted this pull from outside his bubble of safety. That's because while he doesn't know it at this time, later he's gonna remember that these are the last moments of the last full day he could have been with his daughter. Whether she knew why or not, she was right that this time would be the end of their relationship, their final moments together, their Last of Us. And the fact that Joel's gonna blame himself for this, that's foreshadowed in one of the slight changes from the game. Because yes, both stories deal with infected neighbors, but only in the show do we meet the Adlers. And just like how Sarah cares for her father, she makes him breakfast, she encourages him to take vitamin C.
Vitamin C.
There's another child, Mrs. Adler, who dotes on her parent, feeds her, gives her everything she needs, but ultimately she's killed by that parent. So, since again these are new characters for the show, it's a purposeful choice to show that, ironically, when the parent does finally feed, it's on the child. It represents a distorted truth about how Joel will come to feel like his actions cost Sarah her life. In some ways, at least to Joel, it's like he did feed on her. He let her take a bullet for him. Up next in Craig Mazin's story structure is the event that finally shakes the hero out of stasis. The inciting incident is the moment their belief shatters.
The point of the inciting incident is to specifically disrupt a character's stasis. It destroys it, and it forces a choice on the character.
That belief-shattering choice for Joel is made pretty quickly when he's witnessed enough to know stasis ain't an option. They can't stay home. They can't even stay in Austin. Now you might think this would force Joel to accept that trying to keep time frozen isn't the right way to do things, but be it subconsciously or maybe superstitiously, you can imagine that somewhere deep in his psyche, he knows the moment that he let himself wear a working watch, he let time unfreeze, and everything fell to shit.
I think it would have been great if when he showed up at the house, he's like, I'm going back inside. I don't want time to work against me.
I'm taking this watch off.
I'm going to go
on
to
the
sleep.
Yeah, I'm going to put that ninja movie back on TV.
I'm staying in the exact order of things of how I like it to be, as I refuse to adjust to the times right now.
Will not move forward an inch. Yeah, I would like to see that version of the show. It lasts one episode.
Yeah, it's my birthday.
I'm going to eat this cake if it kills me.
That's how I write. That's how I would drive my themes home.
I'm just going to completely negate this inciting incident, and I am going to not change. I'm a static character till I die.
Just ruin all logic for the whole audience.
Now, it's all getting a little blurry about if we're talking about the inciting incident for the show or just for this episode, but either way, let's just think of it as the moment that everything changes and the dominoes start to fall. But first, according to Mazin, after the inciting incident, there's got to be a refusal to act. and it's honestly usually out of cowardice. Before they can make the right choice, the hero tries really hard not to. It's that tug of war we talked about, the yo-yoing of the thesis and the antithesis. They're pushing and pulling until something snaps. And for Craig Mazin, this moment where he had to leave stasis, go out on a limb, and try to do the right thing, it came in 2015. By then, Mazin had already been giving countless interviews where he kept getting asked, hey, what's next for you? And he'd often say that he was looking to write drama. Way back in 2011, he ended an interview super excited about a project he was working on even while he was writing The Hangover 2. He said, it's the first non-comedy I've ever written. It's kind of a thriller, and it's nice to flex that muscle and show people there's another kind of writing that I do.
That became Identity Thief.
We don't know why, but we do know after that he wrote another Hangover sequel, and he wrote Identity Thief.
Actually, it makes sense now why the hangover of this whole video just made me go like look at his comedy filmography now.
Yeah,
because The Hangover 3 was unusually a thriller.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
Not much of a comedy.
No.
It's not a pleasant film. I don't like that one at all. Knowing that like Craig Mazin had this like itch and he had just written a dramatic thriller, but then the next one became Hangover. I always put that on Todd Phillips and the direction he was going down, because he would eventually do things like War Dogs and Joker. So I thought it was just Todd Phillips wanting to take it in that direction.
Yeah,
and maybe he did.
Maybe everybody was like, "We're sick of this."
But you don't do that with the Hangover franchise. So it's just like funny to me to be like, wow, I feel like there's something there.
Yeah,
but why that became such a thriller.
And these clearly weren't movies that were going to scratch that drama itch for him, but everything changed in 2015. We can't know how many times Mazin had been trying to do drama, but clearly it wasn't sticky. So he decided he was going to quit on drama, at least if he didn't get this one last Hail Mary of a project greenlit. He said if they don't like it, he wouldn't do it because something must be wrong with them. If they say no, then he's just wrong. But in 2015, HBO said yes. And Craig Mazin got to make Chernobyl. And honestly, nobody thought he could do it. His friend, Scriptnotes co-host, and a successful screenwriter in his own right, John August, put it pretty clearly.
You doing Chernobyl, that is like Jason Statham doing a dramedy.
But eventually the protagonist realizes there's no way for them to return to that stasis that they desire without embarking on some new adventure. So for Joel, this time, maybe because he was out of time, or maybe because he knew that the survival of his darling, his daughter, or for Craig, his story that he obsessed with, it required them to break their rules and go full steam ahead. So they went for it, and they went hard.
Pitched. And I pitched and pitched.
So now in making Chernobyl, 20 years into his career of screenwriting, Craig Mazin is forced to learn new ways to connect to an audience and make them care about the story he's telling. He's already taught us that a story needs ways for people to connect to the characters, but now in Chernobyl and later in Last of Us, he's adding a layer to the story structure that's dedicated to why now.
A lot of stories, movies, and television shows demand a kind of discussion of relevance.
That's because in stories audiences know well, either because they really happen, like Chernobyl, or because we've just seen them so many times, like a zombie apocalypse. Viewers inherently lack empathy for the characters. Since they know where things are going, people act like they wouldn't make the same mistakes. So Mazin says we have to show them how we do make the same mistakes. In fact, we are making them right now, today, in the real world. So for Craig, he's obsessed with grounding his story about the 1986 meltdown of a Soviet nuclear plant into the reality of that moment by one, being as true to those moments as possible, but two, having a why now connected to our world, at least at the time that he was writing it. And here's what he said was dominating the headlines at the time.
Trump did make a number of false statements in the speech. Trump's claim is false.
Trump spent an entire day repeating a false claim that President Obama literally is the founder of ISIS.
The key wasn't that the 2016 election was known for lies, but rather that America was having this discussion about what the truth even was, and if we could trust our government to be honest with us, which, unsurprisingly, is why the Soviet people, let alone the rest of the world, didn't even really know what happened at Chernobyl. They didn't know what caused it, and they didn't know why it took so long to acknowledge its severity. And so it's not a surprise that the first spoken line in Mazin's Chernobyl is,
"What is the cost of lies?"
And here's the thing, doing the right thing, Craig finally making the show he wanted to make, and Joel finally taking swift action to acknowledge the urgency of the events around him, they don't get replaced by acceptance of this new way of life. In fact, our heroes still want to reject it. They might not believe in their original thesis anymore, but they're not yet willing to fully give in to the antithesis. So even though critics actually completely love Chernobyl,
and the Emmy goes to Craig Mazin!
And Joel had protected his daughter from an attacker. He'd successfully gotten her out of immediate danger. According to Craig, you have to show that your heroes aren't fully on board. And then you have to punish them, both for taking the risk and also for not giving themselves over to it fully.
Make your characters lower their defenses by convincing them that everything's going to be okay, and then punch them right in the face, metaphorically.
So for Joel, he's unwilling to transition to a place of accepting new information and working on action together, a co-reliance. Instead, he'd rather keep Sarah in the dark, prevent her from having new information. He's constantly trying to shield her perception from what's actually happening.
Daddy,
We don't know.
is it from terrorists?
We don't know.
Keep your eyes on me, okay? You don't look anywhere else.
What's really sad is that this is a disagreement about how to love someone. Joel believes the way to show love is to focus on protection. Sarah and Tommy, they both believe that love is shown in a willingness to rely on each other.
Aw, he loves you.
He's dependent on me. Not the same.
I think it's the same.
It's definitely the same.
And for Craig,
Definitely
he might have
the
this
same.
cherished project that people objectively acknowledge is fantastic. But rather than fully give in and accept that he's a great dramatic writer, he's still seeking out negative reviews.
The New York Times did not like Chernobyl. The review was bad. Not bad in the sense of they didn't like the show, but bad in the sense that it was just a bad review. It was poorly written. I thought it was stupid.
So Joel's left wondering if they can even face these new challenges, and Craig's left
like that
wondering
Ben
if his
Affleck
success might have been a fluke. Like, there's a reason they call historical dramas and biopics Oscar bait. Did he take a shortcut that means he's not actually a great dramatic writer? Considering the feedback of the internet, where naysayers always exist, Craig would have to have a superhuman amount of self-assuredness to actually resist the possibility that maybe his success wasn't earned. And so you're gonna have to remember that mindset when I tell you what insane project Craig Mazin worked on next. And over to Joel, he's still unable to look forward. It's actually Tommy that has the foresight to know where things are going. He even foreshadows how the army is not gonna be their savior.
Shit. Fucking army.
Yeah, damn.
I feel like you're right about all these things that you're pointing out, and I love that it's being done in ways where there's deeper meanings to it. Problem that I think often happens with a lot of filmmaking is you go down a path where you know your themes and you know what you want to talk about, and then you're just sort of talking about that. That's what you are communicating via the dialogue of the characters and the actions, versus letting the characters be like real people. And then when you dive deeper into it, then you go, oh, there is a deeper meaning here to what's going on. So as you're presenting all this, audience can still connect with the immediacy of everything that you're talking about, all these scenes you're pointing out. A father protecting his daughter. That's why he's keeping his eyes on her this whole time. That's why he's saying, don't look at this, because she's a young girl. But when you do break it down, you are seeing like what is the subconscious core belief of this character that is coming through a brain that is making him say and choose to do these things without drawing attention to it in a way of going, look how brilliant we are.
Yeah, it's using the language of behavior to have the discussion rather than just making characters sit down and talk about the thing.
Fucking army.
Isn't that good?
It's good for them.
So moments later, when this soldier doesn't abide by Joel's rules and how this all should work,
We're not sick.
behaving in a way
That's
Joel's
Craig Mazin
blind to see
too.
coming, but in a way Tommy might have anticipated, it leaves Joel flat-footed. He just stands there, and it costs him everything. As we now see his watch is broken once again, time freezes once more for Joel. Some of his last words to Sarah, simply another broken promise.
You're gonna be okay.
Now, at the start of Act 2,
I'm gonna
Craig
get my watch
explains
fixed.
to us what our protagonist is going to face next.
You are taking their safety blanket away. So I want you to write your fearful hero honestly. What do they want? A return to what they had. They want to go backwards. And believe it or not, that is the gift that is going to drive you through the second act.
And that's why, 20 years after the events of the prologue, Joel's clinging to a frozen life again.
He's closed off completely.
He wants to retreat back to the idea that if he simply accepts nothing new, he'll stay safe. After all, a monotonous, disaffected life is still technically living, or is it?
I really want to see if Craig Mazin, in conjunction with Neil Druckmann, with all these character choices that I have now been sold on, that is part of at least the show. It seems like it would be in conjunction with the game, but at least for the portrayal of Joel in the show. I would be curious to see if they go back to some conversation, or I don't know, they wouldn't do a flashback, but like have a conversation where you see why Joel turned into that individual who thinks and behaves this way. You know, like we're seeing that he is that way, but I want to know like how he developed into that, basically.
Like in 2003? Like how he became before everything goes.
Well, no, yeah, this resistance against time and this thing to shut off things about reality, because that setup of him as a character who has this resistance against time is in correlation with who he is 20 years later, because he has a hard time just sort of accepting the reality of things.
Yeah, and Sarah's death can't be the originating cause of that. There, like it's almost like an aftershock that makes that part of his character that much more entrenched. So yeah, what led him to becoming this guy in the first place?
Yeah.
The child who wanders toward the quarantine zone shows us what the future holds for something that is technically alive, but barely taking in its surroundings. And that mindless trudging toward the new frontier, hesitation because of what he's been through, a healthy distrust of where things might go next, that all might be what Craig Mazin was feeling when he agreed to take on his next project after Chernobyl. This.
What?
No shit.
We get violent. Feel like a tiger today. Maybe a leopard.
Okay, I'm not gonna pretend Charlie's Angels was some insanely terrible movie when I tell you what insane project Craig Mazin worked on next. I said it wasn't insanely terrible. It was kind of an insane follow-up to Chernobyl, though. But that's only because after years and years of the lighthearted fare that seemed so unfulfilling for Craig Mazin, you'd think he'd want to focus on the work that would feed his soul. He spent years talking about wanting to get a chance to show his dramatic chops, not his karate chops. I'm sorry, but you get it. The good news is, so did he. Because for some reason or another, Craig Mazin actually left that project after only a short while of working on it.
You didn't take this job to fix other people's grammar or fetch me tuna sandwiches and tap. You took this job because you have a vision for yourselves.
And where he went, well, that was...
Shut up, I'll tell you. This is something that I honestly never thought that I would be able to work on. It's a game called The Last of Us. It is my favorite video game, and I played them all. The story is remarkable. The characters are remarkable. It made me feel things.
And what makes him taking on this project all the more interesting is just how scary it is for him to do it.
It's a fear that never used to exist. After reflection, perhaps I'm not the right person to be writing this story or that story, but it is a fear. I mean, the video game community is not shy. So I would say you must do the thing you're afraid of. You must.
The cave you fear to enter holds the answers you seek.
Yes.
And video game fans aren't the only people to be concerned about. Neil Druckmann, the creator of The Last of Us, famously blew off Craig Mazin when he reached out to him about it.
Damn.
But that's the point of Act 2. You have to put the protagonist in a situation where there's no going back, and the likelihood of failure is extremely high. But you also want the hero's past to be custom designed to make them the exact right person to tackle this new adventure. Only someone who has experienced the loss of a child is going to be able to fully grasp the importance of keeping another child alive, and only someone who has survived the deepest pits of critical rejection has the resilience to withstand the impossible pressures being placed on this project. Both heroes are going to have the benefits of their wins and the wisdom of their losses to calibrate themselves for this journey. So for Craig, when he planned the story for The Last of Us, he was able to use every aspect of his career to ensure he'd knock it out of the park with the show. And some of the parts of his career history that he's using are actually pretty surprising, but we'll get back to those.
Wait a minute, what was that graphic there?
Yeah, it's like journey, language, balance, patience,
that's
resilience.
cool.
Yeah. Equip all.
Did you make this graphic? Damn.
Crafts empathetic characters. Hold X to create. I would love a script writing software that is a video game like this.
Yeah, it'd be nice.
Let's start with how what he learned on Chernobyl comes into play here. Like we referenced earlier, Chernobyl had this shortcut to stakes based on the fact that, hey, that thing really happened. On that show, Craig took small liberties to add in some fiction to a mostly non-fiction retelling. But could the opposite work too? On The Last of Us, could Craig Mazin take a mostly fiction story and, with some small liberties, add in some non-fiction that could ground the show to at least some level of the realism that Chernobyl had? I think, yeah, He can, and here's how he does it. We've already seen some nods to real-world issues. The opener had the global warming reference and the thing about a viral pandemic.
Yes, a new virus in Madagascar, say, could be in Chicago within a matter of weeks.
And that thread even makes it all the way to 2003, where for some reason a student in Sarah's class wears an N95 style mask in front of an ironic sign that we'll get back to. Except these are all just the obvious parallels to the current world. But do you remember earlier when I said, I'm actually not talking about COVID here, by the way, but more on that later. I think in order to connect this to the stakes of our world today, but still with the severity of something as solemn as Chernobyl, Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann made purposeful connections to anti-Semitism and the most traumatic event in modern Jewish history, the Holocaust. I know that's so heavy, but you gotta remember the best way for us to analyze the intent of the creators of the show is to focus on the changes that they made from the story that we experience in the game.
I feel like visually, I mean, you know, you're focusing on the pilot, but I'm getting flashes of moments in episode 4 when Joel and Ellie are hiding out away from the hunters and stuff. There's so much imagery that does evoke that, maybe not of real life documentaries or something like that, but, you know, at least the best of the World War II Holocaust movies.
Yeah, mass dead occupations, things like that.
The way they hide out and the kind of hideouts that they're in at the time. There are a lot of those visual imageries that certainly evoke that kind of vibe.
And so as we move forward, I'll go ahead and give you a warning now that this is pretty dark material here. When the TV show story gets to 2023, this entire section with the wandering child is made new just for the show. And it's the first of many analogous moments to the treatment of Jewish people in the 1930s and 40s. For instance, as the child approaches the quarantine zone with barbed wire and signage similar to the Jewish ghettos in places like Poland, he's taken by officers of Fedra. In the games, the Fedra represents the fascist military dictatorship that took power away from the US government in response to the fungal outbreak. In real life, the NSDAP was Hitler's political party who had been given control of German police forces. They used a global economic crisis, the one from the 1920s, to take their power, and then they used that power to institute the mandatory relocation of Jewish families from their homes, rounding them up into trucks, secretly bound for concentration camps, all under an endless parade of false pretenses.
Those people falling out of the cattle trucks had boarded them believing they were being taken to new lives in a new place. The Nazis lied to their victims at every step of their journey towards destruction.
Actually, it was harder than I expected.
Up, he's taken to a sanitation area, which
Missed some
in
of that,
actual concentration camps was often referred to as a quarantine zone.
It began with a forced trip to the showers. Typhus was claiming 500 lives a month. If it had only been prisoners who were at risk, the SS would not have worried. But the Nazis dreaded this disease for themselves.
That was because of real concerns like typhus, in addition to totally bullshit concerns about other needs for sanitation, with the camps themselves actually being way less sanitary than the outside world. And just like how the lies continue in the show, lies tied to the concept of sanitation or medicine were delivered to all the people who entered the camps.
What if I told you that after we gave you some medicine, we're gonna find you your favorite food to eat? Would you like that? And then we'll get you some new clothes and toys, as many as you want to play with.
The difference between truth and lies can be the difference between life and death.
Similarly, as the Jewish people who were selected for sanitation were led to the showers, they were made promises about how after these warm showers, they'd be given new wardrobes soon and feasts awaited.
These were the Jews' final minutes, but the Nazis encouraged them to believe in a future they did not have. What is your trade, a shoemaker? The officer would ask. We need them urgently. Report to me immediately after.
The line just kept going.
People were told to undress in this one, and those in the same room they were even told to remember the place where they put their clothes.
That was when the reminder would come to tile shoes into pairs, so that afterwards you won't have to waste time finding the other shoe. In fact, the SS were thinking practically. The shoes of murdered children would only be of use back home if they came in pairs.
There's actually a pretty famous memorial site that shows these piles of shoes left over from some of these final victims. And it kind of makes you wonder where the shoelaces for sale in the Boston quarantine zone are from. Now, you might have watched this scene and felt for the soldier who maybe was just trying to bring some comfort to this boy in his last moments.
You're safe.
And that might even
It's
be
the
what she
greater
was
system,
doing.
though.
But also, you should keep in mind that after 20 years of this, it's pretty likely that these are just standard systematic precautions that would be in place to prevent any risk.
These were trying to keep the authorities calm. They were afraid of the possible panic among them.
And if we're being honest, some of those lies are a lot less comforting than the others.
We don't want you falling out of the chair.
Now, again, I know this can seem
Jeez,
like
yeah.
a leap, and I'm not
I
trying
don't think
to
so.
at all connect the severity of those horrific events in history to the events of this fictional TV show. I'm just trying to point out that the intent behind this scripting very likely was purposely trying to make these connections. Remember, aside from the depiction of the Fedra, everything I've just mentioned was newly added to the story by Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann. And sure, Craig Mazin often talks about his Jewish heritage.
You know how Jewish I am? I'm so Jewish, you guys. Nobody's as Jewish as I am.
But he's also spoken a bit about Neil Druckmann.
Neil Druckmann, he created the game and the story, and he is Israeli. He's definitely more of a Sephardic kind of guy.
And while Craig and Neil were hard at work on the scripting of this TV show, at the same exact time, Neil was hard at work on The Last of Us 2, the sequel video game.
Craig and I started working while we were at Naughty Dog finishing Last of Us Part 2. So Craig would come over for lunches, and we would start breaking the season.
What? I had no idea. Wow. That's crazy, because there are like references, without going too big here, to the second game for sure. And I could have swore, wow, that's just like wild to me. I mean, kudos to Neil Druckmann for able to multitask like that. But it really felt like they had the two games and then they wanted to like borrow elements from it. But to be part of that kind of just changes up the game on the creative process when you could be there while the creativity is happening for the second game, and then how to really take that over.
Yeah,
it's a different way of absorption. Versus, I played the first game and want to adapt this, and now you're absorbing how the world's going to continue and what elements or storylines can I bring over to here for the show. It's just insane to me. And there's so much of a time difference that I'm like, God damn, this shit takes forever to make, huh?
Yeah, both of them have to take forever to make, and it makes you too wonder, like, I'm sure they didn't hamper anything for one project or the other, but yeah, like, how did the formulation of the show affect at all, if maybe the formulation of Last of Us Part 2 and vice versa, you know?
Yeah.
It's fascinating to think about.
And that game had some very overt references to Jewish culture.
This place is a synagogue. How can you tell?
1,000%. It's Dina's character, yeah.
Even including comparisons of their post-apocalyptic struggles to those of Jewish history.
I like coming from a long line of survivors. You mean after Outbreak Day? That and the Holocaust.
Playing the game, you even find this letter from a rabbi that literally compares his grandfather escaping the Holocaust to his family escaping the outbreak. The common connection he finds is that despite the difficulties, it's people, living people, who matter. So now you might not be as surprised to see when throughout the series there are all kinds of references, some more blatant than others, like in episode 3.
And the government are all Nazis.
The government are all Nazis!
Or more subtle references to Jewish culture, like this quick glimpse of a man wearing a Gore Lieberman shirt, which is doubly relevant, by the way, because Joel Lieberman was the first Jewish person on a U.S. presidential ticket, but also back in 2006, Al Gore won an Oscar for his documentary about our failures to deal with global warming. So it's possible that had he won the presidency in 2000, global warming could have maybe been staved off. Maybe the cordyceps outbreak could have been prevented. Who knows? But actually, I think Druckmann's reasons for invoking the Holocaust go deeper than just a surface level purpose. Because you see, when The Last of Us 2 did come out, it was very well documented that the game had these very clear themes related to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And for some people, that was a very controversial inclusion that ended up creating this heightened tone around the game's discourse. So then, when an actor compared the experience of playing the game to the harrowing emotions brought up by watching a film like Schindler's List, people got really mad. In particular, this one journalist dug in pretty hard. And with the internet being the internet, not only did this somehow spawn a bit of a meme where people would write jokes about video games being compared to incredibly tragic historical events, but then that same journalist joked that Bioshock was like the Diary of Anne Frank.
Oh my God,
that
Jesus.
joke got directly responded to by Neil Druckmann himself. And if you didn't follow gaming news or discourse, you might have missed this controversy, but it actually did go pretty far and wide, to the point where eventually, and again, as he was working on the scripts for this show with Craig Mazin, Druckmann shared how severe the anti-Semitic attacks became. Now, rather than focus on any particular side of that debate, I want to step back and acknowledge how it makes sense then that amidst all of this, the show's creators were feeling that the topic of anti-Semitism anti-Semitism was particularly front of mind at the time, and also if you follow the news over the last few months, it's still something that people are currently actively
1000%.
somehow on both sides of.
I'm referring
Jewish
of course,
space lasers.
to Kanye West. Kanye West.
Anti-Semitic incidents in the U.S. reached an all-time high last year.
And here's where it connects back to the storytelling techniques of Craig Mazin, because it's not just about a connection between our world and the world of the story, but rather it's a connection to the central dramatic argument. And if you remember for The Last of Us, that argument is that there's no greater risk than inaction, looking away, hoping for problems to resolve themselves.
So in some ways, Craig Mazin, it's like he's the protagonist of his own story.
Yeah.
And by doing a thing like this show is taking that action without it feeling like Craig Mazin is talking to me.
Yeah.
He's just letting the show and character and story do its thing.
It's beautiful because he seems like the kind of writer who is capable of doing that anyway, and then to think that it is such like a close collaboration with Neil Druckmann, who also has, I think, probably similar levels of passion and concern for, the dramatic nature of the real world. It's fascinating to behold, and like, even though I'm sure, we can draw narratives out of anything, this does feel like an interestingly timed project with his growth as a person and as a creative in this life.
Yeah.
Ken Burns, probably the most famous documentarian alive, he
Can he
just
be?
released a brand new film specifically about how that's the same exact message America failed to learn during the Holocaust.
I just want to say I love how you implemented the Ken Burns effect.
Over a Ken Burns.
Don't think I didn't notice that.
Ken Burnsception.
Because I didn't know Ken Burns was a person until after I was already Ken Burns in an iMovie.
Ken Burns with the best of them.
We were very surprised to learn that even as early as 1933, there were thousands and thousands of newspaper articles and reports. We did have evidence that something terrible was happening.
Burns even goes so far as to
Oh my
directly
God.
blame a number of deaths on America's mistake of inaction.
That's on Roosevelt, it's on the State Department, it's on the Congress, but it's also on the American people.
And just like Craig Mazin knows that a central dramatic argument from our past is only interesting to us if we can learn how to relate that argument to our lives today, Ken Burns is doing the same thing.
The sequence near the end of the film includes some very recent events. Charlottesville chants of Jews will not replace us. A Camp Auschwitz sweatshirt at the Capitol on January 6th.
That's clear from watching this. The time to save a democracy is before it's lost.
So, just like Sarah's class is studying the differences between fiction and nonfiction, we're seeing here that both forms of storytelling are equally capable of teaching us the same lesson. And Craig Mazin seems to think it's especially true when they can borrow a little bit from each other. So, as we move forward into the new world of Boston post-pandemic, a few more tragic circumstances that are analogous to the Holocaust become apparent, with the public executions, the replacement of money with internal credits and cigarette currency, the having to hide tools and valuables, and tragically the people of the camp responsible for the incineration of their own fellow man. And it's clear that the only way someone can steel themselves for this dire of a life is to completely disassociate. This woman was struggling to throw the boy's body into the fire, but Joel does it without freaking blinking. It's like the Dido song foreshadowed. He's pretending he's moved on from mourning a child, but the fact that he still wears the gift of the ever-broken watch is a reminder that deep down, he's still suffering. Basically, he's in the simplest form of survival mode, which would have actually been pretty familiar for Craig Mazin, who spent years of his career not just on those spoof films, but also as a go-to script doctor, picking up any odd job, separating fulfillment from his career with the need to make a living. This is what made it so much more impressive for Craig to make these dramatic projects, because he openly has admitted they don't pay nearly as well as the other work he was doing.
I'm going to spend a lot of time now on something that I'm not going to make a lot of money on, but I just care about.
Though they can't say that this
Why?
is work that they're proud of,
That's an
because
American way.
Craig, for instance, goes uncredited on a lot of the scripts he works on, and Joel, well, he's clearly done some bad stuff in these last 2 decades, including smuggling drugs to the fascists. It's actually ironic that a twitching hand in Sarah's classroom was the sign of a possible underlying infection, because the same could be said for this officer's twitching hands, except his infection is one of addiction. Showing the soldiers this way is also a new addition to the story, and while in some ways it humanizes them, it's also another connection to the crystal meth and opiate addictions of Nazi soldiers. What Joel says.
Oh, really? I didn't know about that.
Yeah.
The more you shoot people, the harder it is to sleep, I guess.
Now, I know this analysis feels like it's taken this pretty dark turn, but I think that's because the story really does too. In fact, it's appropriate that the first episode's title is When You're Lost in the Darkness. Now, of course, the concern that when working on something so precious after so much serious work and conversation and just darkness is that Craig, just like Joel, could lose himself in that darkness. Certainly, Neil Druckmann's recent experiences weren't really providing much levity to the situation. Just like how Joel shows no signs of acknowledging his sweet, even sometimes kind of silly past with his daughter, we stopped having any sort of semblance to a connection to Craig's past as a comedy writer. It's all as dark as Chernobyl, but with an even higher body count. So now we have Craig on this mission to deliver this incredibly serious, somber piece that's gonna prove that video game adaptations can work, and Joel on a mission to save his brother, though arguably he might not even need saving, and both are doing it just like the truck without the battery.
So it seems like that one of the keys is the classic thing of what makes great script writing and storytelling is allowing yourself to throw yourself into this story in a weird way. It could be unintentional or intentional, but some type of honesty about yourself and vulnerability about yourself, and allow that to be weaved in as the story progresses. Because that is the question posed at the top of this, is how do you make it and how do you identify the emotion? And I feel like with everything that's being broken down in this video, it keeps coming back to Craig Mazin and his shitty spoof comedy.
Just ruined his life and put him in the most despairing place possible. I think that's what people really are getting at when they say write what you know. It's not just like, oh, take something that you know the details about. It's like take the life that applies to you and the experiences and imbue the story with those debates and issues and feelings somehow, rather than just like, you are an accountant, write about accountants. I feel like it gets boiled down that way. But yeah, like take this life and find a way to make this apply to the fiction you're telling.
There's some essential component missing from these utilitarian missions. So we get the same solution for both of them. Enter Ellie. Born in this absolute darkness, she is the light. We meet her and she's bathed in it. She speaks and we get the first thing resembling a lighter tone in this entire post-apocalyptic world.
7, 8, fuck you.
She's not just a spot of brightness in Joel's future, she's actually an outlet for Craig Mazin to bring in a sense of comedy that exists in the world too. And I don't say that to mean that this show needs joke breaks.
What do you want?
I want you to forget this ever happened.
Done. Now your shit has pretty much ruined my week. And I'd like to go home and drink till my face stops hurting. So are we good?
Release the laugh track cut.
Craig Mazin 5 years ago would have done.
That's right. There's a wacky version of this whole show somewhere in a drawer.
I wonder what Craig Mazin thinks of that SNL sketch that they did of The Last of Us.
He wrote and directed
the Mario one.
Oh, I haven't seen it yet.
If it's more of a spoof of Mario, but brought to HBO
sensibility in general.
Yeah.
Okay, I get.
But there's like Pedro Pascal stars in it, so I think that would be. I want to know his response to that. If it's going to inspire him, maybe we could change up season 2 a little bit now.
Second Mario Brothers movie, Craig Mazin will take over.
I say bring back some of that spoof comedy material, Craig Mazin.
Yeah, you got plenty of zombie and infection movies to draw from. Just start throwing blatant references.
I say that because even on our darkest days, the real world still has moments of levity. There's another zombie show that personally got a bit hard for me to watch, not only because it was becoming exhausting to always be dwelling in death, but
My
also
Crazy
it just wasn't
Ex-Girlfriend?
realistic to
The Santa
only hear the
Clarita
sounds of
Diet?
despair. Mazin told us in one of the very first episodes of his podcast over 10 years ago that he knows deep down comedy and drama should coexist.
Whether you're writing a drama or a comedy, you must be writing drama.
They really aren't that different. Oh, also you might have noticed that Ellie lied about her name, with Veronica being a slightly fitting name for the role that she's going to play for these men. Since Saint Veronica, at least in non-canonical Bible stories, she's the woman woman who saw Jesus bearing the cross on his way to Calvary, and in her own small way, she reached out and supported him. She offered him her veil to wipe his blood and sweat from his face.
These Jewish writers implemented my Bible.
Speaking to, it didn't click until just now with the whole Christian thing, and now I'm on board.
Yeah, before I was like, I don't know about this. In a second, you bring some Jesus talk into here.
I'm on board.
Now I'm like, now that's my Jew.
Amen, brother. Not Jews for Jesus.
Of course, this isn't the type of salvation that Joel's hoping for, since he clearly prefers the road he's on with Tess. Unlike what Sarah would have wanted, this is almost a bizarro relationship to the one he had with her. Here, neither person wants to take responsibility for the other, and both seem eager to break promises.
No, I promised Robert that you wouldn't hurt him, but I would very much like for you to hurt him.
Joel even finds himself on the opposite end of the withholding of information.
Who'd he sell it to?
Don't know.
Well, where is he?
Don't know.
Daddy,
Don't know.
is it from terrorists?
No.
That's likely because this isn't the actual relationship he needs in his life. Tess has a bit smaller role in the game, and while her character is actually fascinating here, it doesn't make their pairing any healthier. They're both happy to live in stasis, and we see what extended stasis does to a person moments later. The infected who was left there on his own, the fungus eventually fully overtook him. He grew into the wall. There's no bit of humanity left. That's very near where we find Joel these days. The thing is, this behavior, it's not because of the tragedy the world's experienced, it's still representative of Joel's own individual issues. We know this because if Joel comes to function as a pseudo-father figure to Ellie, we can look back at her relationship with Marlene as that of a pseudo-mother figure. This all is a lot more apparent in the game, but Ellie even asks Marlene,
My fucking mom or something?
Both Joel and Marlene feel a responsibility to protect Ellie, but even this early on in the story, we know they have completely different philosophies about who's worthy of living and the value of one person versus the greater good.
I need it for a better reason than you do. No offense, but Tommy's just one man.
Yeah, it's actually really fascinating because Joel, while experiencing loss, he knew of the world prior to this outbreak. Where Ellie, while there's some traumas to uncover that at the time of recording this video, the show has not necessarily fully gone into just yet, so I don't want to talk about it. But Ellie represents someone who's born post this outbreak, yet is very much more humorous. He seems to be more engaged and lively, and it is an interesting parallel to draw because you got a guy who is so traumatized and so affected, but he at least knew of a life before all this. Where Ellie born into this. So what you're saying about this all boils down to Joel as an individual. That's what I was trying to get at earlier when I was like, I wanted to see why he is the way he is prior to uncover that individual piece, because he's always sort of been this way. It's just only been amplified by day of outbreak and 20 years or something.
Marlene actually represents another nuanced connection to our real world, which Tess clearly labels for us.
The Che Guevara of Boston?
Che was a controversial figure whose role in history kind of depends on who you ask. Some people think his revolutionaries had the right idea, but others call out that, just like the Fireflies in pursuit of something that could be noble, they were far too willing to let innocent people get hurt. Nonetheless, revolutionaries are known for taking action and responding to the times.
Hell yeah.
Joel, as we know, still believes something closer to the opposite of that. In fact, as he tells Ellie,
What are you doing?
Killing time.
the dude is literally killing time in the middle of one of the craziest days of this girl's life. He hates time. The only effort he's willing to put in is to actively prevent Ellie from being able to engage with him further. Specifically, in the same way his daughter did. Because like Sarah, Ellie quickly guesses there's a secret way to communicate with Joel, through music.
The radio's a smuggling code, right?
He's like Bumblebee.
Just talking through the radio. It all makes sense.
Custom designed to get him where he needs to go. It's why her first observation of the man is this.
Your watch is broken.
Just like Sarah, Ellie knows that watch represents everything wrong with Joel. Except what's different about Ellie from Sarah is that Ellie belongs in this world. She's more at home in this world than she would have been in Sarah's. We may meet both of them near windows, but Ellie's difference is symbolized by the butterfly that hangs over this one. Just like how an infected human normally goes through a metamorphosis to become something monstrous, Ellie will soon learn is technically infected, yet she's transforming into something beautiful, a harmonious balance between a desolate human existence and a thriving fungal one. This is actually
New
partially
Testament
represented by the depiction of a sort of fungal form of her and Joel at the end of the opening credits, but there's actually a much better symbol for them that I'm going to get to in a minute. But before that, remember when I told you it's a tug of war between two ideas, thesis and an antithesis? They'll land somewhere in the middle, a point we call synthesis. That's what Ellie is. She's the synthesis of the two worlds and of the two philosophies.
Damn.
Freezing time is not an option, but a complete subservient reliance to somebody isn't right either. Ellie represents the idea that we need to keep moving forward and mutually lean on each other as we go. By the way, I think most of the show is going to take place in this Act 2 of Joel's character arc, but I do think we've had a few moments that could represent the final Mazin story step that I'm going to go over, the element of doubt.
This element of doubt creates a natural conflict with the protagonist because, of course, I believe this, you believe that, but they have to have the capacity to see that maybe there is a better way.
We've seen this tug of war continued a few times, but the biggest example is right here when Joel's brought back to the exact moment time stopped for him way back in 2003, the moment where inaction cost his daughter her life. So, going out on a limb, he decides to take a risk. Instead of the weak pleading and otherwise just standing there, he makes a different choice. This time, he takes action. And it pays off. The ripples of action do mean that the clock is ticking again. Joel's never going to be able to return to his ordinary world, but at least now, he still has his daughter figure there to protect. It turns out his purpose isn't ruined by taking action, and this deeply challenges Joel's belief system. And the Depeche Mode song that plays, Never Let Me Down Again, it hints at what new beliefs are forming. Joel will be Ellie's friend. He'll be there to protect her. As long as she listens to him and follows his rules, he's not going to let his daughter down again.
I love cues like this.
And Craig Mazin isn't going to let us down either, because he's the exact right person to adapt this show.
Hangover 4.
I prefer the Last of Us.
Oh, that's, you know what? I do love it. I love it. God, I love it.
That's because everything he's ever worked on has led to this moment.
All the things that you do prior to something were necessary for one reason or another to get you to what you're doing at this moment.
Yes, he has a deep appreciation for video games, and yes, he's experienced in creating a serious, successful show that posed complex social questions, but it's his lifetime experience and his comedic writing that makes him so perfect for this. Yes, even the spoof movies. Writing a spoof movie is just about loving a genre so deeply that you understand the nuances of the category. And
fucking
that's what
great
Craig
point.
Yeah.
Great ass point, damn.
Set that allows him to decipher and distill down beloved genres like horror or superhero movies and identify the parts that most resonate with the audience. He's now doing that for the zombie genre and the HBO massive world building genre. The video game genre, even a little bit of Western is thrown in there. He's pulling the parts we need as an audience to connect to our favorite elements of those genres. And the reason he's so dang good at it is because of those spoof movies. Unlike an impression or a copy or an homage, those movies are graded on whether or not they click with a feeling the audience has about that genre. It's like how the best comedians know it's their ability to empathize with the audience that is key to them accepting their message, which is how a good stand-up is able to play a room full of people like an instrument. His or her words can control the emotions of an entire audience by just knowing how to relate to them. So comedy taught Craig Mazin how to tell the stories of flawed people. Spoof movies taught him how to create relatable moments in flawed genres, and the two together have given us a familiar genre, but with a deeper human connection to it than we've ever felt before.
Because comedy isn't about 1,000 zombies piling on top of each other like ants to get over a wall. Comedy is about the human condition. There needs to be a period of resistance, and then we begin the adventure.
Just as I said what Ellie represents for Joel, The Last of Us represents for Craig Mazin. He knows the two sides of the argument are tired of pulling away from each other. And I'm not telling Craig Mazin this. He's telling us, don't worry, he's got this. I mean, look at all the work he put into just structuring this thing and the attention to detail because of his love for this project and his desire to get it right. Oh, and speaking of those great details, remember a few minutes ago when I told you, but there's actually a much better symbol for them that I'm going to get to in a minute. Now, before I tell you what that symbol is, I gotta thank you for watching this video this far. This is a brand new channel, and like Joel and like Craig, we're also going out on a limb here. We're trying to take a chance and do something different. Hopefully we're making something people want. If you're a supporter on Patreon, by the way, thank you so much. We could not do it without you, and if you're not, that's fine too. You can help us out by subscribing, commenting, and mostly sharing this video with other people you think it would resonate with. Trust me, you're relying on content. And speaking of that
private
reliance within relationships, that's the symbol of synthesis I wanted to share with you. The symbol that represents Craig in this show, our relationship with him and with Neil, the needed balance between the natural world of the fungus and the artificial constructions of man, and Joel's relationship with Ellie. It's in the final shots of the very first episode.
The buildings.
And yeah, we see these buildings more clearly in episode 2, but for now, remember, this is Craig's directorial debut after over a decade. This is what he wants us to focus on. This symbolism in this moment. Two utilitarian towers covered in natural growth, leaning on each other in a mutually reliant love, just like the kind Sarah believed in, all amidst a storm of danger. We still hear the warning sounds of the 80s soundtrack, the thunder crashing, and even an infected screeching, but at least for now, this
got me, man. You're awesome.
It's not going anywhere. It's persevering. It's in perfectly synthesized balance. And as far as symbols go, it might outlive them all, but for now, it's a great snapshot of what really is The Last of Us.
Great. Great superimposition.
Fantastic, man. That was amazing.
A+, man. This is inspiring.
What I really loved about your video here is it's really easy to get lost in the technical side of what you're doing. Like, oh, this is different. You're sitting, and there's multiple camera angles.
Yeah.
You got one on a trek, slowly moving around. There's a lot of beautiful, fanciful editing going on throughout, and great visuals. Like, it was like the production quality on it was insane. But the thing that I really want to credit you on right now is you still look like you're in good shape. So good job after all that.
Beard's perfectly sculpted.
Yeah, good job, man. I know it's hard to keep that up. And I think you're still keeping it up. Good
Accentuates
job.
your muscles that look like you're trying too hard.
No, what I want to say is that the video like buys you into like, all right, we're getting some different subject ideas, and then as opposed to leading with the really dark, deeper stuff, like super deep, dark stuff, like the Holocaust parallels and whatnot. And what I love is that you told the story here about a story, and you still made it like a character-driven narrative through Craig Mazin's journey of adapting this.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really cool because, you know, you're especially when you're ending this video off on being inspired by this journey you're setting out with Filmwise. I think that is very present here with how this video narratively is structured. Like, I found myself going down like the dark depth paths with the video as it's being presented, and then it comes back with a hopeful end. It's like you found the synthesis at the very end as well within your own video. And I think that's really clever of how this was done.
Yeah.
I thought this was it felt like a documentary.
Yeah.
You know, you said part 1, and I thought it was going to end on like a real cliffhanger of sorts. And it doesn't feel that way. Like, this really feels like something that could be on television because a story was told. Like, oh, exciting. We're introducing a new topic. We're going to go into the weeds of things, and we're going to go real dark. Then we're going to swing back to something a little bit more hopeful. And on top of that, you were also telling the Craig Mazin journey and how that's affected your life. And I think that's really cool. I really love the way this was done because there's so much emotion to it versus just breakdowns or a really intuitive, insightful video essay. Because it's kind of all that, but more.
Well, yeah, I feel like what's so lovely about this, especially for me as a viewer, is like, yeah, you can look at any piece of art or whatever it is in a vacuum and examine it for its own merits and what it's trying to say just as a piece on its own. But what often resonates with me just in my own time, or if I am enamored with a project, is learning about the people who made it and kind of understanding what came together in the real world to produce what I'm enjoying so much now.
Yeah.
And I think here, yeah, you did a great job. People narrativize life, but this didn't feel too contrived or anything like that, or like you're forcing this Craig Mazin story to parallel. Like, it felt very natural, and yeah, like an interesting, engrossing tale about how this got made and why these people, why now, but also, yeah, what is it doing beyond just, oh, here's how it's kind of like the game, or here's how it nods to this movie, or is an interesting sort of documentary on the vitality of all these things.
I mean, even with how you brought it around with Craig Mazin and his struggles with the time when he was working in comedies, you know, so much of this kept seeming like, all right, he had a hard time with comedies. He was burnt out by Hollywood, and it wasn't what he really wanted to do. Then he found Chernobyl and last. All right, but just wrapping it all around to, but that's what led him here, and here's what he learned from there that allowed it's like Craig Mazin, what you're talking about with this whole thing with thesis and antithesis. When you're talking about those, I'm like, you're also doing that with Craig Mazin throughout, and I didn't really even see that until the ending.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh shit, he's
the synthesis.
Philip's video is doing the thing, you know, as opposed to just telling it. We are experiencing it, and I think that's cool. Like, I really found this video to actually be an experience,
100%,
and a narratively really enjoyable one. So this was there's nothing quite like this that I've seen, because it's doing like all the things that I love from, anything from like what Heavy Spoilers will do to Patrick H. Willems to High Top Films. Like, you're doing all of that, but with like this Netflix level type of documentary.
I know, this feels like some kind of cable special or something like that you might tune into. Like it's really polished and really punchy and really engaging.
I was really impressed with this because I was expecting to more be like, all right, there's some cool like information in here. It's not like an Easter egg video, but it's in some ways like the ultimate Easter egg video.
Thematic Easter egg video.
Yeah. It is breaking down why this project is as great as it is.
And as rich as it is.
And as personal as it is. And I wasn't expecting to find something that would be so moving and inspiring, because it's inspiring on the level of seeing how Craig Mazin got to where he is, but it's also inspiring that this is put together, because everyone was just telling me like it's such an impressive video. And you kind of just expect, it's probably gonna be like really cool to look at, and I love Last of Us, so I'm sure it'll be good.
I'll be engrossed either way. Easy sell. Yeah.
But I was not expecting the kind of journey that we went on, and how clever it is without you even telling me, not like Filup texting me. I mean, like you like telling me in the video, like, and see, I've done the thing too. I'm like, oh shit, he's done the thing, without saying that you've done the thing.
Well, and in that way, I think that's part of what separates something like this out too, is because not to slight anybody else's approach, but this one, it's like you could watch this both for your appreciation of just the show and the game as they are, but also you could study this for writing tips and things like that, because it's a comprehensive place to show the creator's input, but also then to extrapolate, break down, and illustrate how that approach then is put to work, and then you're demonstrating. It's kind of like you brought up that thing about parodies and spoofs, about like you have to know the thing inside and out in order to authentically provide that kind of experience. And here I feel like in breaking down the approach to story, like you said, synthesis, thesis, antithesis, and then synthesis, you demonstrated that here in what feels like a very graceful and articulate way. And so it's like you can get your fan rush from this, but you can also get your creative, nutrition in a way, it feels like, from this too.
Like, I get why this took you so long to put together. Like, you can't do this once a week. This is insane.
Between researching, writing, shooting, editing.
A giant ass team to put
how many people worked on this?
I know you had some help here, but I know like it was mainly you who edited this video, and with help from the lady you're dating. Rachel. Yes.
Rachel.
Shouts out to Rachel. I think the writing on this, it's really easy to just look at the production quality of what you have assembled here, but the script on this is pretty phenomenal. I am really blown away by what I just watched. It's intimidating.
It is. It's like intimidating and inspiring.
So I'm just going to look at my most recent Last of Us reaction view count to feel better about myself.
You're doing great. Don't
Until
worry.
your channel is just way too big.
And then I have to
remember
unsubscribe.
when you only got like that many views, and now it makes sense why you have this many views now.
No, you always trend on the trending page.
That was wild.
That was a tour de force.
That was wild. Because, I was like, man, that's a long video.
Yeah. And the thing is, it doesn't feel like it's just shy of an hour. Like, I was so engrossed, and then we were done, and I was like, oh, we're here. Yeah. We're here already.
Yeah, no, I think everything all around was pretty spectacular.
Pitch this to TV, man.
This really could be a show.
Or like a screening you got invited to for somebody's not quite feature-length documentary, but, it's just as good as that.
If anyone deserves to interview Craig Mazin, it's you. That's what I feel right now.
Partway through watching this, I was like, you never know how anybody will feel, but I hope he sees this and appreciates it and feels validated.
It's another New York Times piece.
It was so badly
This is such a shit video.
And then he'll write his own version of this video. Be even better.
Yeah, guys, subscribe to Filmwise. I hope your next one comes out sooner than later. This was phenomenal.
Yeah.
I really mean that.
Hats off.
This was truly phenomenal. We'll talk with you guys soon. And watch the original video link. At least go there and give it a like. All right. I'll see you guys soon.